Hey, it's Chris, Liege of Games. Let's do this, baby. You know what? This one is long overdue, but let's talk about it now. We have Wild Assent Lavon Rising. I finally have my thoughts on it. I want to let you know about it from Lazy Squire Games post-campaign on GameFound. My thoughts on the 5 things that you should know, and talking about a little bit of the 1, should you back if you're not already backing, and 2, if you're backing, what you should get. Without further ado, let's do this. So, as you saw there, not your typical prototype of a game, in a storage container, if you will. That's because there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's also because you need the core of Wild Assent in the first place to utilize it. And that is a blessing and a curse, and we'll talk about that as we get towards the end of the video, on how that affects things. First up, if you're not fully familiar, Wild Assent is a very unique take on the Kingdom Death light style, where you are monster battling, skirmishing with a camp, regroup, upgrade phase in between. And especially, if you are like me, the KDM price point is... And so we're always looking for a lighter, more equivalent, easier accessibility side of things. And when Wild Assent first came out, that was what it was essentially marketed as. And the first one came around, and that's kind of what it was, with a few caveats. I did a review on it when it first came to me, and this is sort of an expounding on that, if you will. A little bit of the same, but also with some new nuance that you need to be aware of. The biggest criticism, myself included, of Wild Assent in the first place was that the campaign was really just a number of missions stringed together without any ramifications or consequences in between. And so when Lavon Rising came around, and Lavon Rising made the waves of things, that was what people were hoping for, right? Because that's also what Kingdom Death Monster has. The actions have consequences, have ramifications. The monsters are one after another, and there's story to go behind it to, the loosest extent that you can in a game like that. And Lavon Rising has delivered a campaign side of things to this. So if that is what you thought was lacking last time, this is worth a look from that side of things. But as my second point now, you also have to be aware, at its core, this is still a skirmish game. This is still a majority skirmish with the campaign to connect the dots in between, to offer you some offshoots in terms of it's not just straight shooting from one to the other, no matter what you do, no matter what the consequences or what happens in said scenario. However, the counterpoint on this, and let me be very clear, it is without a doubt better than the original Wild Assent. No questions asked. No doubt about it whatsoever in my mind. However, counterpoint, there is enough that is still the same in a core that is still skirmish, that if you were not a fan of what it presented to you in the first place, it does not stray enough from that to change your mind at this point. And that's okay, because it is well established for what it is. Because it is very much more accessible than Kingdom Death. The rules are much more straightforward. The battling is much quicker. The enemies are easier to do and to figure out. But again, just like Wild Assent, there is chaos. There is randomness. There are random draws that you will not be able to mitigate or necessarily deal with. And so that still remains. And so if you didn't like it the first time around, you're not going to like it this time around either. But if you did like it, now it's got a little bit more of an aspect to those things that will benefit you alongside of things. Now, my third point is that, like I said, the campaign is a campaign with somewhat mildly branching story points and how you want to perceive things that will then also nicely have some effect on how the battle goes or what you need to do or how that sort of interaction happens. But also, let me be clear. If you are looking for something along the lines of Midara, if you are looking for along the lines of Storm Sunder, this is not that either. That is more truly RPG console style of game with a heavy narrative, heavy upgrade system. This is still, in a nutshell, like I mentioned earlier, a skirmish with a campaign, as weird as that sounds to reiterate. It is not as upgradable. It is not as customizable. It is not as branching. It is not as story-driven necessarily as those. And again, I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but I'm saying that if you want action and you want to be able to get to it quick and go through it quick, this is going to be better than those, because those are going to have other aspects that are going to slow you down in a little bit of a slog at times, for better and for worse, that you may or just may not feel like dealing with at that point. And that's okay. But if you're looking for something more like that, then you look at Lazy Squire's other property of Storm Sunder and you get in on that late backing otherwise right now instead, which I'm in the process of doing. The other question and the other concern that just hasn't been fully fleshed out yet is, when you have all these branching things, when you've got these different scenarios, when you've got Gloomhaven scenarios, when you've got Vagrant Song scenarios, are the scenarios different enough? Because that was also, a slight mild criticism of Wild Ascent originally. Like, the scenarios just weren't quite different enough. When I played Vagrant Song, the ghosts are distinctly, massively different in how they act. And that is a concern in a game like this. How samey are the monsters? The core of Wild Ascent, that was one of my criticisms on my review. The core of Wild Ascent did not necessarily have enough variability. You really need the Silva Stream, you really needed some of the expansion stuff to really give it a good mix. And once you had that, the mix was much better. But the core itself, I was not as pleased with, and, overall from that side of things, in terms of differences. And it's not just, again, it's not, I need a sheer number of massive ones, right? I need ones that are distinctly different. I mean, that's my problem with, and a lot of people's problem with the CMON campaigns, right? When you end up with one of those box of, Kickstarter exclusive stretch goals, and it's got like 374 in them, like, it's shades of, 7 different for the whole 374. Not 374 unique, individually distinct ones. I'm looking at you, Marvel United, where some of them were just frankly lackluster. And that's what I want out of this game, and that's what you needed the expansion for. Which, again, is fine if you're willing to pony that up, because that'll lead me, when I go here to a second, to the page, it's going to cost you much more this time around because of the second edition of this game in the first place. And again, as I said at the beginning, this is a game that you need the core of in the first place to play. This is not a standalone in that sense. And I almost wish it was. But then I think there would be too much overlap between the core and this. And so I see why they did it in the way they did it too. It makes sense. The last thing that you need to know, and the other big thing that I've seen people like and not like, is the camp phase itself. The camp phase where you are upgrading the buildings. You are upgrading the actions that these buildings have. And that is nice to take account for. That is nice to deal with. But sometimes it's just a little bit tedious too. The biggest criticism from the first time around was the healing. Your damage in this game is persistent. And that's a blessing or a curse, again, depending on what you like. In the positive, it really makes you have to think how you want to go and do the battles. It really does. And from that side of things, it really makes it much more strategic. And so if you're looking for something much more strategic, this is good from that side of things because of that mechanism. Because healing is going to take up your actions in the camp phase, so you aren't going to be able to do things. So if you take a bunch of damage by just running up and trying to slog out with the monsters, you're going to suffer the consequences of that in the camp phase. Or you're going to have to risk not healing yourself for the next round. But if you're one of those people who, man, that really stinks, and then because I can't do anything else in the camp phase, because I've had to spend all of my time, action, and energy healing, when all these other games I just heal automatically. And I can spend more time on the making my guy cooler or making my stuff better. So again, which side do you want to fall on? Because I don't think there's a right or a wrong. It's your preference from that side of things. But in the end, again, like I said, if you liked A Wild Ascent, this is going to be better. It is. Because it's addressing some of those other criticisms that it had. Some of the weaknesses are addressed. And it's good from that side of things. Now, let's take a look at the page and let's go through that a little bit on what you should back if you're backing already. A little advice, a little thoughts on that side of things. So here's the page. 800,000 splendiferous from that side of things. Lazy Squire Games. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful. The miniatures, again, Lazy Squire Games, the art, the miniatures are without a doubt, no questions asked, outstanding. Now, the biggest criticism of this was, again, it was the price point. It was a significant upgrade, and we'll just go right down to the rewards here a second. $450 for everything. That's a ton. I mean, it's 10 boxes, right? But it's a ton of stuff. A ton of stuff. And this is one of those games. This is a lifestyle-ish game, right? At this point, if you're paying that much. The core pledge is going to get you, just this, including the stretch goals, for the price of much more from the first campaign. Now, if you already, like me, if you have the copy, then you get one of these. Which, again, is not a bad deal for, 5 boxes. 5 boxes, it's, just over $30 a box. Whereas even the all-in is $45 a box. So, it is what it is. Now, the other thing with the Shadows of Silverstream stuff is a lot of this stuff isn't, I don't think, easily available at retail right now. So that's the other concern, is if you're really looking for this, more may be slightly better. Now, I'm not going to say everything, but again, this is new expansions only is still $250. That's a lot. And that's okay, but it's a lot of stuff and it's a lot of money. Now, again, stretch goals are going to be what they're going to be. It's adding that more variability that I was so enamored with and so I think is necessary. And so it's really something that if you are contemplating, I think you back, because I don't think the retail is going to be quite as good. And I think it's worth paying a little bit of premium from that side of things, because as we've seen with some of these crowdfunding games, that box sometimes is widely available and sometimes it's Cthulhu Death May Die Unspeakable box, and you're paying, $300 for it now, year or two out. And I don't see this one with it not being widely available from the first one around. I can't necessarily see it being widely as available with some of this stuff the second time around either. And that's what you need to know. So we have some of the add-ons here now. Again, looks amazing. That thing is so freaking sweet. I mean, Simon, come on now. You guys can do this. Come on. So what else? I mean, the art in the lore books, I never go for that side of things. But, it's something to consider. Mist Terror, another individual guy that you can get. Now, these 2 expansions are something to be interested in from that side of things. And again, it's more about what you're prioritizing, because, again, you have to be aware of 2-wave shipping. 28 new miniatures, which is awesome. Massive Slivering Devourer, awesome. And it's got 2 new boards, which, again, is something really, really important in a game like this, when you're looking, as I was talking about, for variability with each of their own terrain and each of their own unique effects, which again is something that was slightly less in the base, which you're getting an improvement from on this side of things. So I'm very interested in that one. And then you also have another narrative campaign side of things here with the Daughters of Dracath, Dragon Riders. So are you more of a water? Are you more of a dragon rider? Again, I like the aesthetic of the other one a little bit better, but it's freaking dragons, right? So you just got to be aware. And so here you go. Okay, core box, stretch goals. I love the art as well on these new ones, more than the art on the originals that I have. I just do. Shadows of Silverstream, again, there you go. Stretch goals, save game. Okay, now we're getting into Lavon Rising side of things. And again, that's what you're looking at from those aspects. all of what you're getting. Again, all of the beautiful stuff. We can skim over most of this stuff. And again, the sculpts look better. I mean, the miniatures weren't bad on the first one, but these look just that much better. And so now we get down to Shadows of Silverstream, some of the extras from that. And now we get into the really, really good stuff down here. We get into the wild creatures and the twin dragon. Oh, man, I wish I'd had that thing sitting behind me on my shelf. That thing is cool. And now we get to Lavon Rising. And this is sort of the interesting thing. And I would argue that if you're going to get something, I would probably not just get Lavon Rising, because Lavon Rising itself at $150 is probably not as worth it as if you bundled it with some of the other things to help absorb the overall cost, because I think you're going to be getting more for your buck then. It's weird because I think some of the expansions are almost going to give you just as much value as this was, because you saw with the other expansion for, was it like $40? You're going to get 28 miniatures. So, I mean, this has 77 with 2 extra larges. So, again, it's not a terribly as amazing value as some of the other expansions. You could make an argument that they are almost better from that side of things, but they don't have the 2XL like that guy. So that's probably some of the coolest miniatures I've seen this whole past year on anything crowdfunding. So, again, here you go. Everything else, it gives you the overview. It gives you what you're doing. It talks about all the other stuff. Here's the videos of stuff for all the big guys and everything else you need to know. I don't really think there's a whole lot else. Yeah, I think that's about it. So if we head just back up to the top here, I mean, we'll go back to the rewards here for a second. So I think you're looking at something like this if you really want it. But, I mean, again, this is a lifestyle game price. And so this is something that, if you're going to go for it, you go for this one. I don't think you necessarily need all of the expansions. But again, if you're going to, who knows the availability? And I hate saying that for FOMO purposes, but especially the Waterways and the Daughters one, I don't know. I just know how available they are. And it's sort of a mixed bag when you have to have the Wild Ascent and you have to have some of the Silverstream stuff for some of these other ones. So it's just an interesting aspect of things. I know it's scared people off, but I know other people have been really interested in it. And I guess I was wrong. This is the guy that was free. I screwed up the other one earlier. So anyway, you can get these individual guys, which I believe are like crossovers too. So, yeah, there you go. A little bit of thought behind the campaign. So there you go. Thoughts on Lavon Rising from my side of things, a little bit thoughts on the campaign and sort of where you should go in terms of value, which is a little bit different than a lot of the other big mass market miniature games that I've said in the past, where usually my recommendation is only to get the core if you're really looking for the bang for your buck. But in this one, it's going to be a little bit more based on the circumstances and based on what they're offering. So there you go. Hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If you liked it, shoot me a sub. Hopefully I'll see you around if you like watching my stuff. As always, have a great day.